Hi guys, it's Mrs. Bartlett. How are you? It's our second week of distance learning and you guys have been rock stars. So thank you. I mean, seriously, I'm super proud of you. Keep it up. So today I'm going to read to you day 6, how widespread testing helps flatten the curve. And this actually is my own story. Might be TMI, and I don't know that I'm terribly proud of it in hindsight, but you know what? We didn't have the data that we had on March 7th that we now have on April 5th, which is when I'm recording this. So here's the story. On March 11, I went to the doctor. I had a bad headache, a cough, and I could tell that something was going on with my lungs. I was met at the door by a nurse in full-body, protective, disposable gown, gloves, and mask. We didn't touch as she escorted me to a room in a newly designated special area of the clinic where another nurse, also dressed in a gown, gloves, mask, and a face shield, came in to discuss my symptoms. I felt a twinge of guilt. If I didn't have COVID-19, I knew all that gear would have to become waste. It couldn't, or wouldn't, or shouldn't be used for the next patient. I was only allowed in because I called ahead to share my story, one that made me higher risk than most. 5 days prior, I had been in the same building with a confirmed case of COVID-19. On Saturday, March 7th, my son competed in a Destination Imagination competition. Yeah, think Nerd Olympics, but the athletes are competing in creativity events. And this was at Osceola High School in Wisconsin. Osceola High School is a 9 through 12 school with about 550 students. I'm not sure how many teachers and staff, custodians, cooks, administrators, assistants, etc. also make that place run. School, of course, wasn't in session. It was a Saturday, but there were about 250 people at that Destination Imagination event. As I looked around, it occurred to me that COVID could very well also be there. I scanned the rooms. Which person would most likely be harboring it? That guy? Maybe her. Maybe one of the kids. I brushed this thought aside with another. The statistical odds of someone here having it are extremely low. At the time, Minnesota didn't have any cases, and Wisconsin had only had one in the southeast corner. That person had already been quarantined and recovered. The cases were primarily on the West Coast. In fact, on March 7th, the entire nation had just 435 cases. 435. And then, on Sunday evening, March 10th, we received an email from our kids' high school. There had been a confirmed case of COVID-19 at that event, the county's first. I sent out a few emails asking if I should keep my 3 kids home from school on Monday. The reply was no. That wasn't the guidance that everyone was receiving. A few friends essentially told me I was making a big deal out of nothing by even asking. My kids went to school. My husband, who was also at the event, went to school in St. Paul. So on the day of the event, it was me, my husband, my oldest child, and my youngest child. So the 4 of us had been there. I was on spring break, just like you guys. I asked around, should I be self-quarantining? No one felt it was necessary, and that's not what the CDC was recommending. So on Monday morning, I took my dog to the vet. Mid-afternoon, I picked up my daughter from school and then took her to an eye appointment in a building attached to the local hospital. Later that afternoon, I took her to a therapy center for kids with a variety of special needs. She played in the waiting room, then went on to her speech and occupational therapy appointments, each one lasting about an hour. Monday night, I went to a high school and band and orchestra concert. On Tuesday, I got my hair cut in Stillwater, went to a specialty appointment in Woodbury, where they asked if I was running a fever. I wasn't. I ran to Target afterwards, and then I got a mammogram. I know, TMI, but I just want to let you know how many places I had gone. That was at the Hudson Hospital. They asked if I had a fever or a cough. I did not, but I disclosed that I had been in a building with a confirmed case 4 days earlier. They paused for literally less than a second, then waved me on. Later that afternoon, I picked up my daughter from school and took my son to his orthodontist appointment, the one that wasn't there. On Wednesday, I drove to Maplewood to have my taxes done, and again took my daughter to 2 hours of therapy appointments. I could tell I was coming down with something on this day, Wednesday. It didn't feel like a big deal, and yet it did. I felt guilty, so I called the clinic to tell them I had a headache and a cough, and that I had been at the DI competition. They told me to come in. I didn't have a fever. They asked if I had a sore throat. I did not. I guess that's one of the big symptoms that I didn't know, especially at the time, and you don't hear much about, but they assured me that was one of the more common ones. They asked if I had been contacted by the county as someone who came in direct contact with the individual who had the confirmed case. I had not. Under her breath, the nurse muttered, "There are just so many, they just stopped calling." I explained that I wanted to be cautious, and I could tell I was coming down with something. I had a bad headache and a mild intermittent cough. I don't think I ever coughed while I was there. They tested me for influenza and strep throat. I knew I didn't have either, and their tests confirmed it. After the nurse left the room, the physician's assistant entered. She wasn't wearing a mask. She told me she didn't think I had COVID-19, and they didn't think that I needed to be tested at that time. I asked her if I should quarantine. She said no, but to keep an eye on my symptoms and come back if they got worse. The next day, I brought my daughter in for a scheduled doctor's appointment and was told the entire clinic had only 9 test kits. They didn't test me because they were rationing the few kits they did have. And that's what the whole country has been doing. And that is why a lack of tests is a problem. What if I had COVID-19? How many people did I come in contact with? How many people did those people then come in contact with? And how many people did those people come in contact with? How do we know who should be self-quarantining? And how do we flatten the curve and keep people safe if we don't know who's infected? It's been 21 days. Actually, it's been more than 21 days now. It's been 21 days since I went to the clinic on March 11th, 25 days since the DI competition. If my family and I were going to develop symptoms, we would have by now, though there are asymptomatic cases, and we'll talk about that soon, but the odds of all 5 of us being asymptomatic are astronomically small. We have continued to strictly shelter in place, except for small once-a-week grocery and supply, single-person runs, even though we don't believe that we have COVID or that we would infect anyone. We all know that social distancing is very effective at helping to flatten the curve. And here's why. The orange bars on this graph are the daily official number of cases in the Hubei province in China. So this is where it started. You probably heard of Wuhan. Wuhan is a city in Hubei. And the orange bars are the number of people diagnosed that day. So you can see right here, there's the number that was diagnosed, and it's rising exponentially from about January 21st to about February 6th or 4th or something, and then it starts to fall a little bit. The gray bars show the true daily coronavirus cases. The Chinese CDC found these by asking the confirmed patients when their symptoms started. These cases, the true cases, existed, but they had not been confirmed by a test. They were determined only by looking backwards. So all these people with the orange bars here, once they were confirmed, the doctors asked them, when did your symptoms start? And so like this dude right here said, oh, well, my symptoms started on January 2nd, for example. And so the gray bars are the actual number of cases, the true cases. The authorities, of course, would have no idea when someone started having symptoms. They only know when someone is officially diagnosed, so that's why they had to ask them. What this means is that the authorities only knew about the orange bars. In hindsight, the gray ones show what was really happening. As you can see, on January 21st, the number of new diagnosed cases, which are orange, remember, was approximately 100, and it started to grow. In reality, there were 1,500 new cases that day, growing exponentially. But the authorities didn't know that. What they knew was that suddenly there were 100 new diagnosed cases. So there's the 100, there's the 1,500 on January 21st. 2 days later, approximately 400 diagnosed cases, authorities shut down the city of Wuhan. In reality, there were 2,500 new cases that day, but they didn't know that then. If you stack up all the orange bars until January 22nd, you get 440 cases. Now add up all the gray bars. They add up to about 12,000 cases. Up until January 23rd, when Wuhan closes, you can look at the gray graph and see that it's growing exponentially. True cases were exploding, and as soon as Wuhan shut down, the number of cases slowed down. On January 24th, when another 15 cities shut down, the number of true cases, again the gray bars, grinds to a halt. 2 days later, the maximum number of true cases was reached, and it has gone down ever since. So let's look at that again. So here it's increasing, and then they shut down some more cities, and now that number has been decreasing ever since. Note that the orange cases were still growing exponentially after the gray bars, or the gray true cases. For 12 more days, it looked like this thing was still exploding, but it wasn't. It's just that the existing true cases were now showing symptoms and going to the doctor. In addition, the country was well aware of the crisis and had expanded their testing, so more testing equals more cases. By looking at China's statistics, we can make inferences about where we as Americans are headed and how long that will take. And that's a question that I got from many of you. How long is it going to take till we get back to normal? And we'll discuss that more. Most importantly, our fate is not set in stone. One of the many cool things about science is that by communicating our findings, other scientists can learn from it. And this allows our knowledge to expand even more quickly. So we're learning from the other countries, taking the steps that we know worked and, avoiding the steps that haven't worked, so that we can get back to normal as quickly as possible. That's it for today. Go complete your assignment. See you later. Bye.